Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Grzegorz Kowalczyk. I'm a journalist at Business Insider Poland, and it's my honor to moderate the last session today. It's a pleasure to be here during whole exciting day. I know that we all are looking forward to party, but I promise it will be really exciting and inspiring session. It's obvious where we have such a great LEADhERs. So it's a pleasure to welcome two great LEADhERs, as I said. So Mrs. Suzanne Heywood, Chief Operating Officer in Exor and Chair in CNHi, and Mrs. Rhiannon Martin, Head of FIFA Women's World Cup. So I would like to begin with the question to Mrs. Martin. So how did you envision the evolution of the FIFA Women's World Cup when you assumed leadership? And what strategies did you employ to bring about its transformation into a global spectacle, frankly speaking? No, excuse me.
It's a very good question, actually. I'm privileged enough that the first time I led the FIFA Women's World Cup was back in 2003, so it was 20 years, basically, that I could watch the evolution of how the Women's World Cup expanded, but also how women's football expanded. Back in 2003, we had 16 teams performing. Last year, we had 32 teams, so it actually doubled in participation in 20 years. I must admit, that decision was pretty bold to increase to 32. It was met with quite a lot of skepticism from the outside, people saying, oh my goodness, we're going to have rugby results instead of football results. It's going to be, we're going to see such a massive difference between the very strong teams like the USA, Germany, against some of the weaker teams who are perhaps performing for the very first time. But if we look back at the results that we saw at the Women's World Cup, actually those 8 teams, the 8 debutant teams who were performing for the first time in the Women's World Cup, did incredibly well. You look at Portugal, they were in the same group as the champions in France 2019, the Netherlands and the USA. They almost knocked out the USA in the group stages. I mean, that is incredible. USA had just won back-to-back Women's World Cups in 2015 and 2019. So, they were showing that the debutants were good, were more than good. You look at Morocco, a country very close to my own heart, actually. They performed incredibly well. I think most of you, certainly the people from Qatar, will know how well the men's Moroccan team did in 2022, getting to the semi-finals. Well, their women's team, performing for the very first time, got through to the round of 16, which is incredible. So we've seen how it's grown on the pitch. How that has come about is actually by FIFA, my company, investing in women's football. It's not just about the skill that we see on the pitch, of course. It's about the coaching that is going on in the background. It's about professionalizing the referees. It's about educating women, empowering women as well, teaching women that, yes, if you are menstruating, it doesn't mean that you can't perform. It's helping them to understand how to achieve the best they possibly can. FIFA has grown as well massively. When I joined FIFA myself in 1997, shortly after leaving university, about 35 people in FIFA. Now it's over 1,000, so it's massive. We're getting to the stage when we're having let's call it, as Rupa says, a gender harmony across the company. We're getting closer to having, equal numbers of men and women. And I think, all I can say is that how it's evolved is both on and off the pitch. And I'm absolutely privileged and very proud to be part of this journey and to do my small role in helping this.
Mrs. Heywood, you are a best example of success story, but we know that remarkable challenges marked your upbringing experience. So what advice would you give others who are struggling with adversity?
Well, when I look back, and I was on that boat for 10 years, and I set myself the goal of educating myself, one of the things that I wonder now, kind of looking back at that kind of little girl, is why was it that I was so convinced that education was going to be the answer? And the answer to that is I don't really know, but I think there's two things about education, which is why it's such a powerful thing. The first thing is that even under the most difficult circumstances, education is something that you can control. I had an amazing call a month or so ago with a bunch of girls who've just been evacuated from Afghanistan, and they are now being educated in Canada. And when I talked to them, it was a little bit like talking to myself. You know, what they were saying is the one thing they're going to do is they're going to educate themselves, because they know if they educate themselves, they've got a chance of doing something different in the world. And I knew on that boat that if I educated myself, I didn't know if it was going to allow me to escape. I didn't know if I was going to be able to create a career. I didn't know if I'd be able to get into a university competing with all these people who'd gone to kind of normal schools. But I knew that I had a chance, and I knew it was something that I could control. So if I was talking to somebody now, and there was a question on one of the earlier panels about what to say to people who are, and particularly young girls, who are affected by all of the huge disturbance that we have in the world today. And what I would say is you probably can't do very much about those big events that are happening. But what you can do within, you know, and I admit, you know, some people are going to find it very difficult in their circumstances, but to the extent that you can, even under very difficult circumstances, try to educate yourself, try to help educating people around you, because hopefully sooner or later the conditions will get better, and that will enable you to step out and to play your way in the world, play a role in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I would like to ask an easy question, but the answer can be inspiring. Does FIFA Women World Cup inspire young girls to break the barriers in the current world?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You just look at some of the stars on the stage, you know, like Sam Kerr from Australia, Marta from Brazil, Mary Earps from England, Megan Rapinoe. How can you fail not to be inspired by them? Because not only do they have the fantastic skills on the pitch, but they're also a very strong voice for women. They're a very vocal voice for women as well. People look up to them, girls and boys, men and women. I mean, I admire them all immensely. So yeah, the Women's World Cup is definitely a massive inspiration.
Mrs. Heywood, when you look at your career, what achievement do you hope will be the most influential for the next generation?
Wow. I think the most influential thing that any of us actually can do is hopefully to inspire people who are following us. And there's many different ways in which we can do that. I mean, I'm sure that like many others here, I have many mentees who I talk to. I try to encourage them, in particular, there's a word that, you know, has a bit of a mixed reputation, which is resilience. And I know it has a mixed reputation because people feel sometimes that it's a word that is used to accuse people when they can't kind of bounce back up from something that happens. But to me, it's actually a very important concept because I had a very difficult childhood. But one of the things that I took away from it, which actually has been very valuable for me in my career, is the ability to put things into proportion. So at multiple points in my career, when things have gone wrong, and by the way, many, many things have gone wrong, as we were talking about earlier, you know, you look at people at the stage and you think, well, that must all have been straightforward, but really it wasn't. But I have the ability to put things into proportion, because when something really difficult happens, I think back to being a 7-year-old on a boat, and we were shipwrecked, actually, in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I ended up having my head fractured and multiple operations on a tiny atoll. I won't go into the whole story here. But anyway, I have the ability to put things into proportion. And I think one of the legacies that I can do is to try and share that ability with others. Because many, many people, as they go through their career, they're going to find setbacks. They're going to find that things don't work. If they can put them in proportion, they can pick themselves back up and they can keep going.
And Mrs. Martin, what legacy do you hope do you leave for the next generation of women in football and not only?
Yeah, I think if I look at what I've done to achieve what I have so far, and hopefully still will achieve more, it's pretty logical and straightforward. I think it's hard work, dedication, passion. It's not being afraid of putting the hours in. I think, as was said before by Mrs. Swabowski, it's like rolling up your sleeves sometimes as well and just getting on with the work. I find this is very important. But yeah, if we look at the legacy that we see after a FIFA tournament, for example, what we're seeing in Australia and New Zealand, we've got a 5-year plan. We're not just delivering the tournament for 1 month and then going away. We're looking at leaving a lasting legacy with regards to infrastructure, with education, with giving training to people so that they know how to organise a world-class event. In other sports, they've got Rugby World Cup upcoming. They've got the Olympics coming up too. So hopefully some of the people who have worked with me will be bringing their knowledge to other areas in Australia and New Zealand and around the world too. And lastly, of course, is the legacy of women's football. When I was growing up in Wales in the 1970s, there were no women's or girls' teams that I was able to play on. I was always playing at break times, every lunchtime, playing football, also rugby, with the boys. Yeah, and I think now there are people, young girls, they don't need to look at Cristiano Ronaldo or Gareth Bale as an inspiration. They've got women players who look like them, who go through the same challenges, who have to get over the same obstacles just like them. And they can dream. They know that they can achieve it as long as they have obviously the skills and the hard work.
Mrs. Heywood, if you could impart a piece of advice to inspiring individuals to make a positive impact in their own fields, what would it be?
I think the most positive thing that we can do is to find people in our own areas who, for one reason or another, are not well represented in that area, to find those people and to encourage them to come up in the organization. During COVID, I spent a year being the CEO of one of our companies, Case New Holland, which is quite a big company. It had 70,000 people when I was CEO. And one of the things that we put in place during COVID is we asked every member of the leadership team to mentor 3 people who were junior in the organization. And they had to be 3 people who were in an underrepresented group. So either a woman or somebody from a kind of unrepresented or poorly represented kind of ethnic minority within the company or some other reason. And that was an incredibly powerful program because all of a sudden these people had somebody who they could talk to who was very senior. And actually, even more importantly, the senior people in the organization learned exactly what it was like to sit in a junior position in the company and see and really, really struggle to move their way up through the company. And I think it's through doing things like that, by reaching out to people and helping them up the ladder and realizing that it's still very, very hard to do when you're underrepresented in a company.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite on the stage Ayati Dashkar to ask a question on behalf of the youth.
So, Miss Rhiannon Martin, this is a question from the youth. Oh, thank you. I feel special. So girls are often told, and I was even told, that soccer or football is a bit risky for us. But if you had the world's largest megaphone, what would you yell to encourage us to play our way?
That's a very good question. I would just say, yeah, just dream big, do it, don't be afraid. You're just as good as the boys. In fact, if you look at women's football, in my opinion, it's better than the boys. So.
Thank you. And Miss Susan, I have a question that. And I have this question for Miss Heywood. 43.3 million children miss out on schooling because of violence and discrimination, and 83% of refugees don't know English. So even if education is the ticket to freedom and our place in society, do you think circumstances should shape a young girl's or boy's dream or stop them from dreaming? Or should they dream of or see themselves where they actually saw themselves in society?
Wow. Well, first of all, I think they should absolutely, to echo your words, they should dream big. And I actually want to end on a positive note, because I know a lot of us in our day jobs spend a lot of time thinking now about AI and all of the changes that are coming in. But when I was trying to get an education on that boat, the only way in which I could do it was through the post. And that was pretty difficult because you're on a boat, so I didn't even have an address. But we didn't have the internet. I didn't have phones. I had nothing. Now, with AI coming in particular, and with the availability of the internet much, much more widely, I actually feel very, very happy, because I think many, many more people are going to be able to access education. And they're going to be able to access education in the language that they want to access it in. And I think that's incredible, because I think it has the ability to unlock an entirely new wave of talent, and an entirely new generation of people who previously wouldn't have been able to get that education. So I think that's really amazing, and I think it's going to be incredible to see who we have on the stage in another 5 or 10 years as a result of that.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and enjoy the party.